All right, leaders, in this station, we will work on identifying key poetic devices used by Henry Longfellow in the poem Paul Revere's Ride. So we're first going to take a look at the poem itself and review a couple of key vocabulary terms. So line is the basic unit of a poem. Together, these lines form a stanza. Please listen to the second word. A stanza is a section of poem, consists of one line, or it can be a group of lines. Stanza break is where there's a blank space dividing the two stanzas from each other. So looking at our first page here, this is a group of lines that causes a stanza. This is our first stanza break. I'm also going to remind you that sometimes when poems are printed, they have to go on more than one page. So they would add no stanza break to show us that the stanza continues on the previous page. So this first one is a stanza, so we would label that with a 1. You can do that now, and I'm going to set the timer for a minute, and I want you to go through and I want you to number each stanza in the poem. All right, so let's go through. He said to his friend, start stanza number 2. Then he said goodnight is stanza number 3. It continues on to the second page, so stanza 4 does not start until meanwhile his friend. Then we have then he climbed the tower of the church. If we go on to the next page, the stanza continues, then starts stanza 6, beneath in the churchyard. Then meanwhile, impatient on the mount and ride is starting 7. A hurry of hooves is 8. Again, we notice it says no stanza break. It continues on the next page. He was left to the village, starts stanza 9. It was 12 by the village clock, starts stanza 10. It was 1 by the village clock, starts 11. It was 2 by the village clock, starts 12. And notice there's a no stanza break. It continues on the next page. You know the rest, starts stanza 13. So through the night rode Paul Revere, starts 14. There's no stanza break. It continues to the end. There's one last stanza, 15, and the night message of Paul Revere. It's just a single line that gives us a total of 15 stanzas. Very long poem. So next we're going to review 3 more vocabulary terms. Alliteration, which is the repetition of sound at the beginning of several words in order or near one another. Repetition is saying the same letter, sounds, or words over and over again. And slant rhyming is the words that share only the final consonant sound. So what we're going to do is give you some time to underline rhyming pairs throughout the poem. So here I've already underlined the first 3 stanzas for you. And I want you to take note that in stanza 1, we have here and Revere that are a partner group. So that's one color I underlined. And then 5 and alive are another. So that's a different color. And then we have year. So if I were to read the whole stanza, listen, my child, and you were here. Let me try that again. Listen, my child, and you will hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. So year rhymes with here and revere. Even though it has a rhyming pair separating it, it's still a rhyming pattern. So we're going to ask you to use different colors. You probably need 2 to 3, maybe 4 in a stanza. So looking at stanza 2, we have march and arch that rhyme, but they're also separated by the rhyming pair night and light. Then we go back to having C and B right behind each other, alarm, farm, and arm finish up that stanza. So there'll be instances where the rhyming is back to back, and there'll be instances where the rhyming is spread out. So just make sure that you are using the same color pattern for the same set of rhyming words, like I did with March and Arch, and then a different one for night and light. And then there is a third rhyming pair, C and B. And in stanza 2, there was actually that fourth one, alarm, farm, and arm. Okay. And then for stanza 3, I repeated or, sure, and at the very end is war. And then we have bay and lay, but the stanza does continue on the next page, and it's spar and bar to give a third rhyming pair for that stanza. Magnificent and tide don't even rhyme. So that's okay. There was 2 lines that don't rhyme. I just leave them not underlined. So we're going to ask you to take some time to do that now. So after you've underlined the ones that we have lined here, you're going to continue through the next or the rest of the poem. So you have 12 stanzas left that you are going to underline the rhyming pairs. All right, so now that you have taken time to underline the pairs, we're going to ask you to take a look at identifying some additional poetic devices. You're going to use your worksheet packet for this one. So the poetic devices are point of view. Remember, we've talked about first person point of view, which includes when the speaker is using I, me, we, us, um, and they're included in that narration. So they're a part of the scene. We also have third person point of view, which is when the speaker is describing events that they are not a part of. We have alliteration, which is the repetition of sounds at the beginning of several words in order or near one another. We have imagery, which describes writing used to help provide the detail and help the reader paint a picture. We have rhyming, which is saying the same letter, sounds, and words over and over again. We have a metaphor, which is a comparison of 2 things that do not use like or as. And we have a simile, which is a comparison of 2 things that does use the words like or as. So you can pause the video here so you have your definitions. And in your activity packet, we're going to ask you to pick out one example from Paul Revere's Ride that shows each poetic device.